Hello and welcome everyone to this Friday webinar in the free Friday webinar series that we are doing. This is actually the first webinar we have this year because we weren't capable of starting last week, which was originally the plan. So these webinars are automatically captioned. If you are using the CC button in Zoom, you will have the English captions, and we will have today a short presentation and then followed by Q&A. And if you want to ask a question to the speaker, please use the Q&A function. The chat is open for any technical issues. But it's hard for me to look into places, so please do use the Q&A function for questions. And after the webinar, we will post, or at the end of the webinar rather, we will post a link to the smart guide in Swedish and English in the chat just after, in the end of the presentation. And as usual, we're very happy that so many people show up to these webinars. We are doing a lot of webinars on documents and document accessibility, and every time it's around 300 people registering every time. So thank you for being so interested in documents. We have today a very good speaker, Peter Kemmen, who is a document specialist and also leading the ACC-ICT expert team. That's the standardization organization or standardization committee doing work right now on some technical reports for the Commission within the mandate. Mandate 587, which is the mandates on the presumed conformance of the European Accessibility Act. So apart from doing documents, which we will hear about today, he's also doing a lot to make sure that procurement processes becomes better for public sector bodies. He has a background in the European Commission, and he's the only person that I know who really investigated on how difficult it is to do PDF remediation by actually learning how to do PDF remediation. And that led him into being a specialist in that and an expert and certified expert and everything. So that's impressive. It's possible to stick to documents in a good way for many years. And I also want to say that this webinar is slightly different than some of the others are, because we are now focusing on what you as a content creator or document person should think about, and we kind of move away from the direct end user focus here, but focus rather on the people who are the professionals creating things in order to make them better for people with disabilities. So it's kind of another step on the way. But after this webinar, you will know everything and work much better and more efficient. I think Peter has promised me to provide all of that. Please, Peter. You are muted.
Thank you for that as well, and thank you for the nice introduction, Susanna. As Susanna mentioned, this time it's a bit different. It will be more technical, but the structure is similar to what we usually do. So try to organize it around 5 topics, and then we have a Q&A session afterwards. And the aim is to help you today's workshop or webinar doesn't give you a workflow as such, but helps you decide your own workflow and gives you some pointers what you should consider to have a more efficient PDF document remediation. So let's get to it. First is to use the source file whenever it's possible. In general, the idea is it's the best if you have a source file, so a Microsoft Office document usually, or Adobe InDesign document that is as accessible as possible, because then you have to do less remediation in PDF. It's also useful because if there's a newer version of the document, for example, it's a report and the numbers change, and so the content changes. If the source file is accessible or as much as accessible as possible, then you don't have to redo that many things in the PDF remediation round. So overall, it's more efficient. But here I'd like to talk to you about some things that are definitely much easier to do in the source file and can be pretty burdensome in the PDF. My favorite example is setting the language. if some elements, some lines have a different language set, for example, it's an English document, but two of the lines are in German. First, it's difficult to find. You have to go through all the text to find them, or listen through with a screen reader, well set up screen reader. And then also you have to change them line by line. So it's much easier to just use the source file, and with 2-3 clicks, you can define the primary language for the whole document. You should do it right before exporting to PDF. Why? Because sometimes when you add a word to your Word document, for example, it somehow reverts to setting, default setting, and that one word will have a different language setting. And as I said, it's difficult to find afterwards in the PDF. And for the user, it can be read out in the long language, which is either difficult or impossible to understand sometimes. Apart from that, the obvious examples is to change the content, so to correct a typo or change the contrast of an image, or to change the formatting, like changing from justified alignment to left aligned. It's all much easier. It's possible to do in PDF, but have a lot of work. So it's much easier to just go back to the source file, change it quickly, and save in PDF. Another important thing is how to export to PDF. There are different ways. Usually from Office files, there are two ways. It used to be called Save As, and then you choose the PDF file format. Now it's called Save a Copy, or the Save as Adobe PDF. And the second sounds better, but it's not always better. It depends on the content. So here's some examples. I used actually this slide deck, fully made accessible, and then export it to PDF using the two methods, and you can see the results from the pack checker. The errors are different for the two. In the first case with the Save a Copy, you can see that, for example, figures don't have the bounding boxes defined. It means that assistive technology doesn't know what are the dimensions, where is exactly an image in the document. And in the other export option, you don't have the display of document title setting properly set. It's what you set up in the initial view in the properties, and it should be set to document title. In this case, what an assistive technology would read out is the file name, which sometimes is meaningless. So if you look at it, you say the second option is better for this file because 2 clicks and then it's fully accessible technically. But then if you look at the document, this one had a special font and exported pretty badly with the Save as Adobe PDF option. It's still solvable, but I would choose the Save a Copy option for this case. So it shows that each remediation is different. What does it mean in the workflow? These things, so you should always do first check for the language, if there's any problem, for example, and then identify the issues, go back to source format and export it with the best option possible. And then after that, you can start with the rest, with tagging, with setting up the different elements. So that was the first one. The second one is still not actually remediating in PDF, but to prepare for it. What I often do, if it's a bigger document or with slide decks, I structure the tag tree for easy handling. So I use the part, the article, or the section tags. In this case, the image shows the section tags used for each slide. It helps me when I have to change from the tag tree to the content tree to identify where I'm at in the document. And for longer, like 70 pages document, I do it usually by chapter. Then I can just open that part of the document, that part of the tag tree, and then collapse it, close it up again, and move to the next. One important thing when you use the sect tag or the section tag, then it's possible to put titles next to it. So here are slides 1, slides 2, slide 3, but those are read out by assistive technology, read out by screen readers. So if they are meaningless, then when you finish remediation, you should clean it up. Another thing to do is use the built-in functions and shortcuts. From the context menu in the tag tree, I would underline these 4 tools or functions. Role mapping helps you map custom text to standard text, so what should be used in a PDF document. Instead of renaming tags, you can do it with a couple of clicks. The other one is find text from selection. It means that you select the text or an element in the document, and with this function, you get to the right place in the tag tree. Then highlight content, I'd like to mention, because it means that wherever you are in the tag tree, the content is shown in the document. But if your computer is a bit low on capacity, then it can slow down your computer. If you accidentally click on the document tag, for example, then everything will be highlighted and your computer might pause a couple of seconds or a minute. So I usually turn it off before saving the document. It's the same thing. And finally, delete empty tags. I prefer to use it instead of delete tags, because that way I don't accidentally delete a tag that has content in it. And there are also some useful shortcuts, which my 2 favorites are to open, expand only one tag. So if I click on the slide 8 section and click and press the asterisk button on the numerical pad, then it expands that tag. And if I press Shift 8, then it will extend all the tags. And then, of course, you can walk around the tag tree using the arrow buttons on your keyboard as well. Now, let's start remediating. There's a thing I like to call domino effect. It's maybe a bit drastic name, but it means that when you change something, it might change something else in the document. Typical example is when you change the reading order or Z order, and it can change the content order. Some text might disappear, and it can also change the tag order. I'll show you what it means. Here, this is a screenshot of the smart guide that you can look at after this webinar. The smart guide text should be first in the reading order, but it's the fourth. So what I did, I moved it to the right place to be the first, and you can see that the text disappeared. If you go to the content panel, you can see that the content is listed in a stacking order. So what's first, that's at the bottom of the stack. So what happens here is the text is below the background that should be behind it, this blue square. So I changed the order and now it appears. Perfect. Let's see if something happened with the tags as well. And yes, these 2 lines got to the end of the tag tree. They should be at the beginning, because this also defines a specific reading order for most of the assistive technologies. So I just put them to the right place. And now you can see it's all good. You can see all the text, the reading order is good, and the tag order is good as well. So what does it mean for the workflow? You should do these things in the right order. You should first arrange the Z order, the reading order, and only after that bother with the text, because it can mess up and then you have to redo it. Another thing similar but even worse is there are certain things that can corrupt your document. The typical example is editing content. So if you find a typo or accidentally a text is struck through and you need to change it, then you can edit the document. You can edit a PDF if you cannot go back to the source file. But you need to turn that block where this content is and the previous and the following block into artifacts. So get rid of the tagging, and then you have to retag it. And also in this action, your document might get corrupted. It's happening less and less with the new Adobe Acrobat versions, and actually it's not even always necessary anymore to untag the content, but most of the time it's still, or with older version, it's still necessary. Or another example, when you have to separate content into more text, for example, if you want to artifact the leading dots, the dots in a table of content, because it's not necessary that the screen reader, for example, reads them out. So you have to separate that, create a new tag and artifact it. And sometimes this also, there are many ways, various ways to do it, and some of those ways may corrupt your document. So what should you do? How does it affect your workflow? If you cannot go back to the source file, then again, do this first. Actually, do this even before the reading order, and definitely do them before tagging, because if you have to untag what you already fixed, then that's not efficient. And in general, create recovery points when you remediate the PDF, but even more in these cases when you have these interventions, changing the content, editing the text, or breaking up tags. And the last point is how to do more things at the same time, how to work in batches, how to group similar tasks together. For example, it means that you choose different elements and you do the same action at once for all of them. Good example is changing tags for different content, typically, for example, from paragraph to label, or adding actual text to bullets, which I will show you, or changing white spaces into artifacts. It's usually happening at the end of table of contents. At the end of each line, there's an empty element, and you can select them all and turn them into artifact at once, instead of doing it one by one. So here is how it works with the bullets. Here you can see that there's these empty circle bullet points, which might be read out as O by a screen reader. So we want the screen reader to read it as bullet. I select them all. I turn on the reading order tool. I marquee at once all these bullets. Accidentally, the X from examples also falls in the marking. So I get rid of it by marking that, pressing down the control button, so it takes it away. Then I go to the find tag from selection, which I mentioned before, and this will give you all the right content element tags which you want to handle. Then from the context menu, by clicking on any of these, you choose properties, and in the actual text field, you type in bullet. And then you close it and it's done. So now all these bullets are read out as bullet instead of O by a screen reader. Another thing I would like to mention is that there are built-in tools in Acrobat Pro that also do work for you in batches and automated. In pre-flight, you have the add unique ID to note elements fix that gives an ID to each note elements. You don't have to do it manually. Mark all non-structured elements as artifact, marks everything that's not tagged as artifact, so you don't have to do that manually one by one. And correct language for list labels handles a bug that happens when some versions of InDesign exporting list, the list labels will have a setting of US English. Another thing is in the table editor, you can auto-generate header cell IDs, which is useful for complex tables. Well, that was all. I hope it was useful, and we have a bit of a time for questions.
Thank you, Peter. That was many useful things, I think. And Also good that you show that sometimes not everything goes perfectly right. So that's very useful not to be kind of overwhelmed by the manual or demo being perfect. So I think maybe we can maybe we can even stop sharing so people can see you when you respond. We do have a couple of questions for you. Well, that's not the one to show. The inevitable question, will AI help in some way with this? Can some tasks be automated, leaving human intervention for the more tricky things?
I hope so, yes. I think it's possible that AI well-trained would recognize, for example, the right reading order better. I think it's already used. If it gets better, then less menial remediation work will be necessary. But I think humans will be necessary for a good while because you always have to check it on the one hand. And on the other hand, that's also part of a remediation when you kind of have to rethink the structure and, for example, instead of a table, retag it as a list because it's easier to understand. And I think that AI might not be helpful for a while still, but that's just my personal opinion. In general, yes, it will help in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. And this one is in Swedish, so I'm translating. When you have, for example, a super long PDF, for example, a thesis, does the whole thesis need to be existing as an HTML, or is it enough with just a summary? So do you need to provide, I think it's, do you need to provide an HTML version of a PDF? I think that is the question.
Don't need to, but in general, HTML is better with accessibility. You can set up a lot of things with PDF, nearly everything, but it's a lot of work. So if you provide it in HTML, that's a very good thing. And then ideally you should provide it. You could provide it all in HTML. That would make your document or the access to the information even more accessible, if it's accessible HTML.
Yeah, and if this is a question about what is legally required, it's not required to make anything in HTML. You can make it in any format you like. If you prefer to have your whole website in PDF, that's absolutely fine, but you need to make it accessible. And it's easier to make HTML accessible than PDF. So the recommendation is HTML, but you don't have to make an HTML. And if you would only do a summary, if you have an inaccessible PDF, that wasn't in the question, but I kind of between the lines, I think if you have an inaccessible PDF, no, it's not enough to just make a summary accessible. That's not how the law works.
Yeah, not only the law, but from the original perspective of making it possible for people to get information, to have access to information, a summary will not have all the details, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. Questions are coming in. I think I missed what tools were used for remediating PDFs. I don't know if you said that, but maybe you can mention something.
So in this case, what I used was only Adobe Acrobat Pro, and I showed the pack checker, which is an analysis tool not used for remediation, but there are third-party tools that can be used typically for what I mentioned as an example to fix the bounding boxes for images. There are tools, they are not for free, that can be used and do it as well in batch at the same time.
Perfect, thank you. Is reading order and tag order equally important?
Yes, I would say. So the thing is that it's a strange thing with PDFs. There are two ways of defining reading order for older assistive technologies. It's the reading order or the Z order that is relevant. And for newer, and I think more and more, it will be the tag order that's relevant. But at this point, because not everybody has access to the newest assistive technology, it's important to set up both.
Thank you. And we got a follow-up question about pack checker. It's PAC. That's the name of the abbreviation. You find it from pack. PAC is the name of the checker. And I guess we could send more information in the chat maybe, or afterwards. We can add that to the email afterwards. So another question for you, Peter, is how to save depends on the source file. So you said that how to save depend on the source file, but how do I select the right one? So yeah.
You need to test it because each document is different. This one, what I showed, had this this font type that couldn't be exported well in one export option. So what I do is I check it with I export it 2 ways and do a quick check in the PAC, the pack checker, and see what things are more difficult to fix, how many errors one export manner and how many the other gives, and also have a visual check and see, for example, there are things that are not in the pack checker. This when a font gets corrupted in the export, but also sometimes in one way the bullets in a bullet list are not exported as separate labels, which is a requirement in the standard. So if you have only so you check that as well. You have a quick review, and then you decide which needs less work.
Thank you. And someone in the audience have already found and posted the link. So thank you very much for that. We get support from everyone. Our clients are asking us quite often if they could use this or that software to create accessible PDFs. Is Adobe the only software to create accessible PDFs?
No. No, it's not.
I think you need to elaborate a little bit.
Yes. No, I was just thinking. So it is possible to have an accessible PDF without using any paid software. If it's a simple Word document, for example, and it's set up properly, made accessible, and it's exported, then there's a very high likelihood that it's accessible, completely accessible according to even the PDF UA standard, or at least very accessible. To make sure to see it, there's the Acrobat Pro, but there are also other PDF handlers, and there are also specific tools to fix, to remediate PDFs. Can mention Common Look, for example, or Access PDF.
Thank you. And I think this may be part of the same thing. How good or bad is Adobe Access? I don't know if that's...
I cannot answer that question.
Okay. So we need more information about what that is. What's the best way to learn how to remediate a PDF?
Well,
we have courses. No.
We have, yeah. So there's basic information on the Adobe website, but it's a lot of text. I think the best is to start with an introductory course and then do it yourself. There's a lot of things always extra which you can only learn by doing it. But I think because it's the whole PDF structure is a bit difficult. I think it's very useful to have a training and to start out at least, and then if you have the possibility to have another training to build on top of it and practice.
Yeah, practical. That's really, I think, practical work is where this is really needed. It's not a theoretical thing. You actually need to do it. And so it's Access PDF. Sorry, I misread that. It was, so it's a commercial tool for PDF remediation. So that is what it was about. Yeah.
It's good. It does things. It doesn't do everything. I mean, there's no tool, commercial or any, that fixes everything at this point. So this is Access PDF, as far as I know, is as far as I've seen, is useful for doing things that might take an hour doing. Some of them doing 2 minutes.
And in general, we do not recommend this or that commercial thing. If there is a market and the different tools do different things, then we try to say this has a beneficial here and this is better for that, because we want to stay independent and not being paid by anyone to say anything else. So thank you very much for all these questions. There are a couple of we couldn't respond, but we'll try to make them in the email afterwards. So I think we need to wrap up because these webinars are supposed to be very short and sweet. So Peter, if you can show the last goodbye thing. Takes a lot of time for you to screen share today.
Should be there.
So, oh my God, it's myself. Now Stefan has put all the links to the smart guides in the chat. And thank you, Peter, very much for this quick and comprehensive walkthrough of good things to know when you do accessibility remediation of PDFs. We came a little bit out of our every second week Friday thing, so we are doing another one next Friday, and then there will be every other week as usual. So I will do a frequently asked questions about the Accessibility Act, kind of a countdown. So it's 5 months to go to the application of the EAA. So if you have any questions you would like us to respond to, then you can also send in your questions on beforehand. But we have a long list of things that people usually ask us, and we will try to answer all those questions, or some of them at least, next Friday. So with that, thank you very much. Have a really nice weekend, and don't forget to focus on making things accessible. Bye-bye.
Bye.